Now, it's no secret that I actually like Hot Wheels since I was a little kid. Mainly because I love cars, but then also at the same time, during that era of Hot Wheels back in the 2000s and the early 2010s, I do like this sort of concept car where you could sort of envision of how it'll look like in the future, or at least somewhat given that of like glimpse into the unknown. Well, basically, Hot Wheels made some of these fantasy cars for a reason, and also licensed cars. Because, yeah, there are some cars that try to be replicated into the model form of Hot Wheels, but yet again, on real cars, sign me the fuck up. Anyway, here are my top 10 Hot Wheels cars that I've owned. Number 10, we'll start off with Power Driver.
If I have to.
Now, this is the only Metal Mania car that I've owned back in 2022 before I actually got Hollowback, and this is basically, well, my first Metal Mania car. Now, you see, the thing about Power Driver is that it has an exposed big block engine, which basically every Metal Maniac has most of the time, but I think you get the consensus here, considering that the fact that this is sort of like a muscle culture, but then you sort of mix that up with that sort of Mad Max style. And that's what Power Driver did there. It's basically a beautiful car, really, and the fact that like the front bumper sort of resembles like a Camaro, kind of sells me on that sort of design. Power Driver is actually one of, if not my favorite Metal Maniac cars, unknowingly. Because back then I used to be a really big Tech Group fan, but I think more over the years I kind of delved into like other teams, mainly because they're probably more cheaper to collect, and also my growing love for racing drones has kind of grown immeasurably high. So yeah, Power Driver, a solid number 10 in my spot, but not enough to reach the higher ranks.
Number 9.
Now, the next one is a licensed model. So, the Ferrari 333 SP. Now, I do have two of those, but I would prefer the white one with the red flames on it. You see, the white, red, and black combo just blends in really well with this paint scheme. And yet, Hot Wheels did not disappoint with this paint job. Now, yes, it's not that realistic, which I do kind of get, because considering the fact that this is for like a mainline, which, okay, yeah, it makes sense overall. But still, they killed it out of the park. They somewhat sort of got this design really well to kind of flow with the colors and kind of flow with basically the paint scheme overall. Even with that red roll hoop on like the driver's cockpit. Beautiful.
Number 8.
Now, the Lumina stock car is actually quite unexpected because this is actually one of, if not the oldest Hot Wheels cars I've owned. Not as in I've held in my hand, but as in like this car is older than most of the cars I've collected. Seeing that the Lumina stock car is only produced in 1995 and was never produced again. And this is actually pretty beautiful. Now, as you can see, I'm not a big fan of NASCAR and all that kind of stuff, but the complexity of the sponsorships and mixed with the simplicity of just putting the Hot Wheels logo with the number 1 on it just sells in really well for me. Even with that big red Chevy logo that's not really that clear on the car, just makes it pretty well. And it's actually quite top heavy as well. Now, that's not a factor to that I like, but you know, still, this sort of nostalgia of the NASCAR old days kind of sells it on me. And actually, this is one, if not like the unexpected castings I actually grew to love to this very day. Maybe because I just do love the blue, red, and white segment on it, but then there's also like this sort of complex sponsorship laid on the side right there, which describes old NASCAR perfectly. And I have to admit, the new NASCAR seems a little bit boring, doesn't it? So, coming in at number 7, High Voltage. Now, I have to admit, I don't like the movie version of High Voltage, mainly because the color just doesn't really suit well with the car, but when you look at the toy version, everything will change your mind. Now, it's basically a black body with some orange decals on it, although there are some decals you can't really see, but I do love the tiny touch that it has a sort of like electric pattern, which actually fits in with the name of the car itself. Hence, there's a reason why I actually do like High Voltage. And also the fact that black and orange combination, it blends in really well. Coming in at number 6, RD06. Of course, the futuristic hot rod. Now, intentionally, I never really liked this car back then when I was a kid, mainly because I see it as like a villain car and just this sort of trope of Stormtrooper where it just basically kind of just dies in the middle of the battlefield. But looking back at the car, just the overall design of it, it just looks beautiful and it just fits in with the sort of futuristic hot rod powered by hydrogen, of course, as said in the car gallery. The angular shape, everything, it just fits with the car itself. I did a review on that car actually. If you want to check that out, links in the description below. Or that card right there. I don't really have anything to say other than just the immaculate details that have been put in the car as well. And also, like, the car is a little bit top heavy as well due to the fact that it's also built for tracks. And yeah, pretty cool body with the matte black paint, except it's actually plastic, but not metal. But the metal part is in the chassis itself, which is pretty good for the tracks, I have to admit. So, moving on.
Number 5.
Now, of course, who would forget the iconic Euro 2, except that's in 5th place for me. Now, I do love the modernized and more futuristic design of the Dodge Diora. Now the car, retrofitted with the 5-dot wheels, it actually suits the car a lot and its design aesthetic to it. While it may not be in the concept art, of course, it's still rock, the surfer bot. And, of course, it's a big truck with a big engine on the back. Details are neat. You can detach the surfboards anytime you want, and you can place them whatever you like. Just make sure you don't lose them. And yes, it's also the iconic vert wheeler car before we move on to Power Rage and Reverb during the accelerations line. Although I do get it, I don't have the Wave Rippers one. The original one still sells it for me, and that's pretty good. Sippo gray with Sippo blue surfboards on the top. Good.
Number 4.
MSC Suzuka. Now, I haven't played Velocity X before I actually got this car. I never really knew anything about Velocity X yet, but I've heard some bits of it here and there. But when I got the car itself, oh boy, you don't need a JDM if you want to get this fantasy JDM. Because the thing about this car is that it's inspired by the Tudor culture, and you can see the design cues here and there. Basically, it kind of represents like the sort of mid-engine coupe, but then it's basically kind of made for the sort of time trial in some way or another. You can see like the really big splitter in the front, the big spoiler in the rear, with some aerodynamic parts on that, with the carbon fiber texture embedded on the car as well. Beautiful. It's a timeless classic. Now, we're moving on to the top 3. Okay, a shout out to a friend named Tino JCA for actually making me like this car. Although I never really liked the initial design of it back then, I grew to love this thing in my collection. Mainly because it kind of reminds me of my friend. So, here it is. Rocket Fire. Now I do get it. Some people might not like it. Some people do like it. But for me, it's a gem. A hidden gem. Because this car is basically a rocket ship on wheels. And the first edition's paint got the exact details right. Now I do get it. I don't get why the wheels are a little bit weird on this part. Maybe it's because I think they kind of grabbed that attention to detail of the car sort of like entering the atmosphere while the wheels are just burning orange. It kind of simulates that burning glow of those wheels, which actually is a pretty nice touch. Maybe just my own words, but I don't know if that's the case. And also these golden interior parts that kind of make sense, because I think that's what they use when they're trying to like travel on space, because I've seen some aircrafts that actually do have this sort of golden paint while they're doing some space expeditions or whatever. And with the touch of white and black on there and the American flag, not bad. But it's not as sleek as the top 2 cars that I own. Now, top 2, RD02. It kind of makes sense, no? That was a shit pun. RD02 is a drone car from the Accelerators line, similar to the reasons that I have said in the RD06 part. But this time, I actually do like how angular, jagged, sleek this car looks, especially with the bug-eyed cockpit of the car. Because as you can see, the fact that like it kind of makes sense as if this were like sort of like an insect in a way, where it's basically just a minion worshipping the queen, which is the RD09. So yeah, it does make sense. And the detail that they've touched up with the engine or technical details of the car itself, even with the co-mold 6-spoke wheels. And actually, fun fact, this was my first Accelerations car that I've bought and also owned when I was a little kid. But I do own another version of RD02 as a kid, in which I lost it, but get to rebought the original one. So yes, that's beautiful. But unfortunately, this kind of gets shoved aside when I actually got my personal favorite drone car. That is the RD10. Now, I didn't really know anything about this car back then when I was probably a little kid, but then as I turned 13 years old, I do really want this car. Mainly because it just looks slow, sleek, looks like a fighter jet as well. And the asymmetry of it with the cockpit on the right and the turbine engine on the left. but like the design is, it just looks so sharp. It's jagged as well, but less jagged compared to the RD02, and more streamlined as well, because you could see some of the aerodynamic parts that were kind of sculpted into the car itself on like those kind of air scoops. No, it's not the air scoops, but kind of like those winglets on the front of the car, if you can tell. The amount of attention to detail kind of designing this jet fusion racer just looks beautiful. Mainly because I also love the idea of open wheel racers, but then this is more like a rocket type of racer. And it also kind of reminds me of Jet Thread 3.0. So yeah, that is about it. My top 10 cars that I own in my collection. But honorable mentions include RD03, Slingshot, Asphalt Assault, El Segundo Coupe, Hollowback, Cold Flight, Excellium, a Subaru 22B, and that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. See you on the next one, whether it be an Unleashed video or not, but we'll have to see. And yeah, take care guys.